You may remember from Algebra 1 that a geometric sequence is a sequence of numbers that have a common ratio, which basically means that when you go from one term to the next, you're either multiplying or dividing by the same value over and over again. The formula for our geometric sequence is a sub n is equal to a sub 1, which is the first term in your sequence of numbers, multiplied by r to the n minus 1, where r represents that common ratio. We're going to start by just looking at a couple examples where we're asked to write the rule for the geometric sequence and then find a specific term in that sequence there. So for our first example, they want us to find the 9th term of the geometric sequence whose first term is 4. So when they tell me that, they're telling me that a sub 1 is equal to 4 and whose common ratio is 1/2. So by telling me the common ratio, they're telling me that r is 1/2. So before I go and find the 9th term, I'm going to write my rule using a sub n is equal to a sub 1 times r to the n minus 1. So to write my rule, I'm going to replace a sub 1 in the rule with the number 4, and I'm going to replace my common ratio with that value of 1/2 and raise that to the n minus 1. Now this entire ratio, both the numerator and the denominator, are being raised to that exponent. Once I have my formula, now I can go ahead and find whatever term I want to find. So in this case, they want me to find the 9th term. So I'm going to go ahead and find a sub 9, and in order to do that, I'm just going to go and replace the n in this formula with the number 9. So I'm going to get 4 times 1/2 raised to the 9 minus 1, or 4 times 1/2 to the 8th. All right, now if I go off to the side and do that math, 1 to the 8th power is going to stay 1, and 2 to the 8th power is 256. And then if I simplify that fraction, I can divide 256 by 4 and reduce that. That's going to give me a final value of 1 divided by 64. So that means that the 9th term for that specific sequence is this value of 1/64. Now, we were pretty lucky in that problem. They gave me my first term and my common ratio. But sometimes what they might do is give you a sequence of numbers, and then we can use that sequence to determine what our first term is and what the common ratio is. So they've given me the fact that this is indeed a geometric sequence. And the first number we see is 6. So right here we know that a sub 1 is 6. And in order to find our common ratio, we can choose any two consecutive terms and divide them to find r. I usually start with my first and my second term. And to find the ratio, I take the second term and divide it by that first term. But you can really do any two consecutive terms, always taking the later one and dividing it by the one right in front of it. So in this case, I'm going to take my second term of -2 and divide it by my first term of 6. So my common ratio after I reduce that fraction would be -1/3. So now the first step said write a formula for the nth term. So I'm going to write my rule. A sub n is equal to a sub 1 times my common ratio of -1/3 raised to the n minus 1. So that's the first part of the question. And then they asked me to find, so they said find a formula, we did that. Now they want me to find the 10th term. So to find the 10th term, I'm going to go a sub 10 is equal to 6, and then times that quantity of -1/3 raised to the 10 minus first power, or 6 times -1/3, that quantity raised to the 9th power. Now I went off to the side and I already did that math. Now a negative raised to the 9th power, any negative number raised to an odd power is going to stay negative, so that numerator is -1, and 3 to the 9th power is 19,683. And then again, I would multiply these two together. So my fraction would be -6 divided by this value of 19,683. And it turns out we can reduce that fraction. Both of these are divisible by 6. I'm sorry, they're both divisible by 3. So I can make this become -2 divided by 6,561. So basically whenever you're given a sequence of terms, your a sub 1 is your first number, and then your common ratio, you're going to divide the second term by the first term. And then once you have that, you can use your formula and then substitute whatever term they want you to find. You substitute that number in for n and just work out the math. All right, so you should remember doing this in Algebra 1. And so this was just a nice quick review of that.